Why has it seemed so often that so many young people like us have been fleeing from evangelical Christianity towards the Catholic and Orthodox traditions? Here to help answer that question today is Dillon Baker of the Protestant Gentleman. We're very excited to be speaking with you today. Dillon, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us what you're about.
Yeah. Wow. What a topic and question that I have to try to take on. But yeah, I'm the Protestant Gentleman. I would say my mission's twofold. It is to help restore the strong Christian man back to where I believe his gifting and purpose was oriented by God, but society and culture has slowly taken it away from us. And that it's twofold. It's building up what I am calling the Protestant Gentleman, so that traditional masculine God-centered man. Taking on, I would say, the internal principles of that, and then external, where is the church at, and specifically in the Protestant world. I'm not trying to take on the Catholic and Orthodox. I have met my match maybe on that side. They are very cultivated. But in the Protestant world, what is the dynamics that are happening across our denomination, specifically in the main lines and in the non-denominational world, and what culture and attitude has led to are men becoming somewhat feminized, or that masculinity taken away, or even confused is maybe a better word to say. And so I am trying to cultivate maybe you would say a persona of what a Christian man should look like and what he could really dive into, but also how can the church answer that call as well by helping those men find their purpose again. And so you said introduce yourself, a little bit about my background. I got saved later on in life. I was in the non-denominational SBC world for a long time, got raised up into that through a college ministry, went on to go to seminary at SBTS, at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, where I obviously studied, and then did ministry for a long time. And so I got to see behind the scenes of what the non-denominational church is like, and maybe where we're going wrong. And eventually along that line, I kind of abandoned my family, so you'd say, and I got disenchanted with the non-denominational world. I started reading church history. I started to understand that the Protestant church is much bigger than the non-denominational world, especially here in America. And can the non-denominational world / Protestantism answer this question of masculinity? And so that is where my journey has taken me so far.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I'm a very big fan of the content that you've been putting out. I relate to it very heavily. I grew up in a very evangelical, non-denominational church. I actually discovered you through your video on leaving non-denominational evangelical megachurch, and I spent a lot of time in SBC circles in college, and again have recently been disenchanted with that kind of church structure and theology in just reading about church fathers and church history. And it's made me realize that, like you've been saying, I think a symptom of me growing up in that sphere was a really strong disconnection of what it meant to be a gentleman, what it meant to be a godly man. And it wasn't until I really started connecting with historical Protestant belief and just historical small c Catholic belief that I've really started to connect with what it means to be a man of God. Yeah. And so we've really loved your story. So if you want to maybe talk about some of the reasons personally that you left your megachurch. I know that you were kind of involved with the leadership there. If you want to maybe talk about what you were involved in and what was really the final straw for you that caused you to leave.
Yeah, I would say it's been over the past year, and I would say it genuinely started with men. It started with me walking into a Sunday morning service and feeling as if I'd always left the service not understanding quite what I got out of it. And then reading books like, with people in my church, with brothers in my church, reading things like The Holiness of God by R.C. Sproul, and understanding the majesty of God, the holiness of God. We're so good at the relationship part of God and the Father and the brotherly affectionate for God, but then that holiness, that reverence. I mean, you see Peter in I believe it's Matthew 17, that falls on his face when he sees God, and you see Isaiah, and you're like, God is huge and magnificent and something that we can never comprehend. Yet when you walk into a non-denominational church, a big black mega church, and I really do not want to criticize them. I'm not trying to battle with the non-denominational church anymore. But just this is a personal conviction of mine of like, I didn't feel that holiness. The sermons are great. The theology is great. But I wanted to really reflect on who God was wholesomely. And so when I would read those books, I would feel what I would now call cognitive dissonance. It's where you know something is wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it. And I would say that happened for me about a year ago. And then I started to look at, okay, why did the non-denominational church start? How did it start? Who were the primary pushers of this type of model? Why did they start it that way? And then also, like, what was the goal? And is that goal being accomplished? And what I found was answers I didn't like. And so if you were to go back in the non-denominational world, they started with the Anabaptists. I won't go too much in the history of that.
Sure.
But basically, they were even the rebels among rebels in the Protestant Reformation.
Yeah.
And so if Martin Luther and Calvin were rebels, then the Anabaptists were even a step farther.
Yeah.
That's where the non-denominational would get its roots. And then you look into the seeker-sensitive model, the church growth movement, and stories like Bill Hybels, who literally walked around Chicago, knocked on doors, and said, "What don't you like about church? If I fixed it, will you come?" In my view, a terrible way to start a church. That's saying that I am going to make a church for you, not for God. I am not going, I'm going to really cater towards the non-believers over the believers. And so I started to slowly piece together these things, and I just felt extremely convicted of, I don't want to be a part of this, and saying that that's okay, and that the seeker-sensitive movement is okay, and really doing this worship, entertainment, consumeristic version of church, like that's the church that I'm proud of and that I condone. And then I would say a couple of months ago, I was still attending this mega church, and I am actively trying to engage with my pastors about some of the things that I'm learning and I'm hearing, and trying to figure out if there's ever a way to mend these two convictions of like, man, I love the non-denominational church. I love its theology. The sermons are usually solid, but then I'm having all of these other thoughts, and basically there was just no way that I found where you could ever mend those two fences. Yeah. They are going one way, and they're proud of that way, and that's where they're going. And there was a guy that came up to me. He's a good friend of mine here locally. And he said, "Man, I love the content that you're making. I feel all of those same things." Exactly what you were just talking about, Ryan. I feel all of those same things. I would love to come to your church. If these are the things you care about, and this is the man that you're becoming and you want to surround yourself with, then the church that you're a part of has to be a great church.
Yeah.
Right.
I couldn't recommend my own church. I said, if you're looking for what I'm talking about, don't come to my church. And that hit me like a ton of bricks after I walked out. I was like, I am philosophically and just like as a man opposed to the same model that I am in. And there's no way I'm going to walk in on a Sunday morning and be happy with my experience. It's just not going to happen. I'm going to continue to dislike this.
Yeah.
So that's where my past year has come from.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's been fascinating seeing how universal the same feeling has been. Now we're seeing it a little bit through the lens of the internet, so you never know what's actually true. But it's seeming like men our age are getting exactly the same feelings of just being very dissatisfied with. Ironically, the churches that were trying to bring them in, trying to make church cool, have suddenly become really uncool. And that's been an interesting thing to try to grasp, to try to understand.
Yeah, and I think that move towards, maybe you could call it church conservatism, right, of desiring more of a manly role, right, has led a lot of people to flee to even Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches as well. I know that I've seen some friends of mine do that. Do you think that that's a natural reaction, or why maybe are people fleeing to those types of traditions instead of to maybe traditional Protestantism?
Yeah, great question. I'll circle back the loop on what I said earlier. you have to understand what the goal of all of this was, and is that goal being accomplished? And so another facet of my discovery over the past year is our goal was to seek the non-believer who was not, who wanted nothing to do with the traditional version of church. And then you go ask them. And so one of my first videos I ever posted, I shared something with a prominent podcaster where he said he attended a megachurch and he was completely thrown off with the experience that he had. And it was like the people that we're trying to get are very just taken back by the model that we have created. And it's kind of twofold. It's if you create something for people and you try to keep up with what you would say is maybe pop culture or seeker sensitivity, well, that will change on a dime. People change on a dime. Our tastes change on a dime. Our culture changes on a dime. And so that means the church will constantly have to reinvent itself if it's trying to make people happy. If it's trying to keep up with that type of mentality, then, man, you're going to be chasing your tail for the rest of the rest of our humanity until Jesus comes back. We will constantly be mulling over trying to figure out, what do people want now? Oh, they don't like this. We must change that. And that will throw the believers that are actually in the congregation, that'll throw them every 10 to 20 years, it'll throw them through a whirlwind. Rather than, I would say, the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholic Church, they have stayed relatively the same. I mean, we have Vatican II, which they debate, and you have the Novus Ordo, but they're having a lot of those same problems too. And so I don't know why they decided to follow us, because it was a dead end. But they know who they are and they know what they're for. And there's something about that when someone is confident in who they are and they're not ashamed of it because they're trying to glorify God, and glorifying God has not changed for 2,000 years. It's been the same. And they're proud of that. There's something timeless about it, kind of like a white T-shirt or a black T-shirt. Like, there's something just timeless about it no matter what culture you're in. And so if you win them with the principles and you win them with the gospel of Jesus Christ, then the church service doesn't matter. If you win them with the entertainment value and the contemporary music and the culture and the cool clothes and the skinny jeans and the celebrity pastor, well, as soon as that stuff's not cool anymore, you're going to have a big exodus. And but we can go to the Catholic Orthodox conversation if you'd like.
Real quick, I wanted to comment on the music. I work in Christian music very specifically, and I've had the privilege of being able to listen and work with a lot of Christian artists. And it's interesting to hear how it has changed so much throughout the past 20 years, right? We've seen this. I mean, Keith Green was kind of one of those guys in the 60s or the 70s and 80s that was a really big name. And it's completely shifted in genre to more of like this Bethel style. And even from 20 years ago, more of like an alternative rock with like Switchfoot and stuff. It changes every 10 years or so, right? And so I think that you're totally right. Like, it's created a culture that is forced change because it needs to keep people engaged and it needs to be matching that pop culture. But is that matching the steadiness that God has for us? Not certain about that. And often these songs don't even match up with correct theology, you know? So I think that what you're pointing out is really good.
Well, and I have to ask too, you really pointed towards the practices of the church and the fact that Catholic will maybe change a little bit, Orthodox never changes, but what is it about holding to a seemingly timeless practice and orthopraxy that is so appealing to young men, and why is it so important? Basically, what I'm getting at is I can hear kind of a response from a non-denominational pastor saying, well, the important thing that we identify ourselves with is purely our relationship with Jesus. And that's the only thing that matters. All of that other stuff, all of that orthopraxy is just man-made tradition. Why do we need any of that? Why can't all of that stuff change as long as we hold fast to our relationship with God? Yeah,
great question. There is something to a foundation as a human being in which you can stack on different, I would say, values and principles. And so I guess where I'm trying to go with this is when something's constantly changing, it's really hard to grab it as a man. And if the church is constantly just about surface level, the architecture doesn't matter, the culture doesn't matter, none of this matters, it's all fleeting, it's really hard to care about it. It's hard to want to build upon that for generations to generations. And then also, we have a culture that's moving so fast in the political world, in America. Everything around us is going 1,000 miles per hour. And in the church, it seems as if men specifically want something slower so they can slowly dive deeper. And what the megachurch model does is it's really good at the baseline. What I would say is, like, if there's level 10 to Christianity, you're just like, you're super sanctified by 9 and 10. I would say that non-denominationalism has like 1 to 3 covered super duper well, but it does not have a very good foundation for like 3 to 9. we can't be perfect. And that's because you can't, like, if things are changing, you can't go to that next level. If you don't understand what architecture means and you don't have like a good theology around that, you can't go to the next level. And so if everything looks the same and you know exactly why we do things, the next week, the next year, the next generation, you can slowly stack those skills because these things are already taken care of. And that's what I think the Catholic Church does super well, is like they have a catechism that literally lays out everything that they've ever thought about a different topic, and you can just take that for gospel. And we as Protestants would say that they've gone too far on some things and really take things too far. But it's like, as a Christian, if I'm a new Christian, I would love to have some type of manual of how I think about things so I can dig deeper. You guys know probably from creating content as a marketing guy, your audience wants to understand what they're coming to. And so you guys are making videos about the rosary. And every day it's probably stacking on, and you have an audience who understands the context, understands who you guys are, understands what you're trying to do, and they want to follow along. If they feel like they can do that, they can develop as a person. Like if they feel like they know where to go for this question, they know what we think about abortion, they know what we think about traditional marriage, you can slowly start to dig really deep into your faith. And so I think men love that stability. They love that purpose, and they love that there's an answer for things. It's not this wishy-washy, it's just this fluffy relationship and nothing else matters. It's like, I don't know how to navigate my personal life. Like, I need answers to these things, and why do we think this way? And men, just like the military, they're so much better under structure, militant structure, and then consistency. And so in our personal lives with exercising or in our jobs, consistency stacks. Finance, if you're investing in the stock market, that compounding consistency will stack over generations. And that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for just like little nuggets here and there. We want to be able to stack. And when the church is constantly changing, you can't do that. You have nothing to grab onto.
Well, and man, you brought up politics, and I've been thinking about this recently too, as we've been preparing for this. Young men our age grew up in the 2016, 2020, and 2024 elections, literally the most unprecedented elections in American history. And coming into that, those were very formative years where we were told that politics was going to save us, that in order to enact change in the world, in order to actually make the country better, you had to go to the polling booth. And we experienced 2016, which was full of vitriol and just brother against brother. And then 2020, which led into a global pandemic and just political unrest. And then 2024, which was just equally as bizarre and just unexplainable. And I think, speaking from my personal experience, I wanted to get out of politics. It made me realize that it's completely futile, and I think a lot of young men and really just everyone is running into this idea that the American political sphere is totally broken, and the way to save the world is not through politics, but through the church. But going to a church that's constantly changing and is appealing to me and almost feels political, it's no different than politics. And people want something that's never going to change, that always knows what it believes and isn't going to flip on a dime tomorrow. They want to root themselves in something that's eternal. And personally, I feel like that's the way we save the world, is by allowing God to do it.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. And I think selfishness is showing itself to be, again, what you said, futile. It's not, if you base an entire culture around selfish consumerism, and then that bleeds into the church, which if you do a little bit of research, like that's kind of where all of this came from, eventually we get tired of ourselves. We need something bigger. And the more that you can get out of your own way and diminish your own preferences, and you could say that the Catholic Church would probably, on a fun or entertainment level, it's not going to be as entertaining as the non-denominational church. And that's just like, it is what it is. But that's good. You get to die to yourself, and you get to be intentional. I've been changing my attire, even going to church. And in my non-denominational church, if I wore this, I stuck out like a sore thumb. But it's because I want to actually be intentional with the way that I dress, with the way that I'm approaching the service. It's not about me, it's about God. And that is good. It's good to practice that. When you get married, you start to understand how truly selfish you are. And it's good for you to serve your wife and to get out of your own way. And sometimes with the church, we have said, no, it's okay for you to be selfish. We will create the model that will allow you to be selfish, so you can have all of your preferences and glorify God. And what we figured out is that just really breeds very shallow disciples and really comfortable men. We don't want comfortable men. We want men who are dying and sacrificing themselves at the altar and actually pursuing God because he's worth it, not because it's easy. And so, for us to try to match culture, I think it's doing the exact opposite of everything that we wanted it to do.
So I guess this leads perfectly into the next question. Do you think that non-denominational churches that are experiencing those problems can be revived in a way? And like, what's the way that they could even go about that? Because they've obviously strayed far from what you're talking about.
Yeah, I will probably go more doomsday, and like I want to be hopeful. Like I have just so many amazing mentors and friends in the non-denominational church, and so it's truly not against them. My heart and my passion is unity in the Protestant church. That's what I want more than anything. I think that that's the only way you can survive, to be honest with you, in any organization. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a business, doesn't matter if it's a country, doesn't matter if it's a church. It needs unity. We must actually be on the same team. In the non-denominational world, it's every single corner has a completely different structure. Pastors don't speak to each other, and there's no organizational unity. I think that is doomed to fail overall, and so it's based off two things. It's based off of trying to make man happy, and then it's doing its own thing with no unity or accountability.
Yeah. If you're enjoying this content, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We're going to be dropping a lot more like this, so stay tuned for that. Let's get back to the video.
Yeah. So, Dillon, I mean, what is your advice overall to men, and really just anyone that is feeling disillusioned with their evangelical church? Do you think they should stay and try to reform their non-denominational church? Should they flee? Where should they go? What should they do? Who do they study? What is your response to that?
Yeah, absolutely. My heart would be to never do an Irish goodbye. And so never separate from your church unless it's like absolutely necessary, unless you've gone through all the precautions. If you are in a good Bible preaching church that the pastors are on the same page and you have open dialogue with them and they seem to be somewhat open to these conversations, I don't think you should ever abandon ship. And it should be a pretty hard process. It shouldn't be like, I don't agree anymore, I'm out. Yeah. That's not the way you should go about it. And so I don't want to promote that whatsoever. How I would prefer this to take place is that these non-denominational church either cultivate to make somewhat of a denomination. I know the SBC, a lot of these churches are loosely tied to the SBC, and try to say that they're a non-denominational denomination. They're loosely tied. I don't think that does anyone any any favors. It's like saying you're married but not really married. Like we're sort of married. It's like, no, like if you're actually going to try to cultivate a denomination and actually have things that you're going to agree on and vote on, then actually try to be a denomination, and then somewhat try to come together with the main lines. And as I'm explaining this, I understand how hard that is. I understand that I know I pick on these guys quite a bit, but like a Stephen Furtick or a Michael Todd or a Joel Osteen, those typical people that we think is like the front of the pack for the non-denominational world, there is just no conversation whatsoever of coming together as a denomination or ever thinking about being with the main lines. And so I really don't know if like the traditional Protestants, the Reformed, the Lutheran Calvins are really ever going to agree with the Anabaptists. Like they've been at odds for basically the whole Reformation. And so I wish that could take place, but I don't think so. I truly think the non-denominational world will either get much bigger somehow, like they'll either like continue to flourish and America will do its thing and like the consumerism aspect of church, or it'll just completely die out. I don't know if there's a version where they find a middle ground and they unify together and they join the main lines and they become one of the strongest parts of the Protestant Reformation. It's just the foundation and the principles that they have built their entire model off of. It just seems irreconcilable, maybe, of like how you started the church and what the congregation will react if you even try to do this. Like you'll have to change your mind on the sacraments. Like you'll have to change the liturgy, and you'll have just a massive exodus. And I just don't know if a guy who's looking out at 5,000 people will ever decide to do that to himself. But let's go to some practical. And so if a guy is feeling this way, I would say go talk to your pastors, go talk to your elders about some of the things that you were feeling. Have an open and transparent conversation. If you're looking at the Eucharist differently, if you're looking at the liturgy differently, and wanting to ask questions about why they might be doing worship the way they are, continuing to grow, going to that fourth service to get that 5,000 people mark or something like that, and they're going to a satellite model, and you truly just cannot get behind the core philosophy of why they might be doing that, then there's a conversation to be had. But my perspective was I was going to go until I was practically kicked out of the church and see how far I could take it. But I just like could not get behind the direction that we were going. And I was more of a detriment to the body. And I was starting to really cause divisions because I would have conversations with some of the men in my church about some of the things that I was feeling. And there would be people that would react super harshly and think that I was like a big threat to the unity, or they were like, yeah, like I completely agree. Let's flip all the tables. And I was like, oh snap! Like there wasn't like a middle ground for me of like how to fix this problem in my local congregation. And so I really just started to ask questions and then started to read more, I would say, of the Protestant Reformation. What were the principles? What was the theology of that? And then what churches actually match that type of conviction? Who follows real presence? Who takes liturgy and architecture more seriously? Who cares about these things that I care about? And then tried to really go and find the main lines that might match that.
That's really good.
Yeah, well, and you kind of mentioned the desire to kind of start flipping the tables. I think we've all maybe noticed that some of the most vitriolic people on the internet are actually young men that have recently discovered either Orthodoxy or Catholicism and are starting to call those evangelical Christians heretics and starting to flip some online tables. What would you say to those men that... like how should we approach even this desire of like everything that I grew up with is wrong? I'm even guilty of this a little bit of like, I want to evangelize to everyone in non-denominational churches. Guys, this is not the right way to do it. What would you say to that?
Can I circle back when I figured it out?
Totally. Ongoing conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say at the beginning of this year, I had much more of that attitude. I was much more upset when you start to figure out like how we got here and in the decisions that we're making, and the feminization of men, and understanding that the women practically can run this church, and we're making the decisions for all the wrong reasons. And as a man, I do think you could be rightfully, righteously upset about those things. And I think that there is a place to disagree, and disagree boldly. I think we've lost that. There's a lot of people who are kind of upset, speaking of politics, about like maybe the Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, and they're having it out. And it's like, there's something good about this public discourse where men are actively, if it's important enough, actively disagreeing. Of course, we have the online sphere that is really flaring up things, and so it can feel more dramatic. But I think to see grown men actually wrestling with these things, passionate, maybe that's the word I would use, is passionate enough to care about the church, to actually have the conversations. You don't do it disrespectfully. You don't do it with the intent of trying to prove someone wrong. But just like Martin Luther, if there is a conviction of something that's really done at the detriment of God's church, you should want to fight for that. And a lot of times it is young men who change the world because they have that passion. Sometimes as you get older, it seems like that dog kind of dies in you a little bit. You lose a little bit of that bark, and you just want to keep everything settled. Like, you have your wife, you have your kids, and you have your job, and you're just trying to keep everything steady. Sometimes it's the young men who don't have as much to lose, or maybe they're a little bit ignorant of the consequences that could come, but they're the ones who end up changing things. And so even though a lot of people would comment on Redeem Zoomer and how far he's gone, there is something to at least having a mission and a vision of what could change and doing something about it. That's incredible. Yeah. And so, but finding that balance, I think I would push guys to be more passionate and go for it and learn along the way, get some mentors, make sure that you're just not completely being reckless with your words or trying to really disunify the church. But at the same time, like, you're going to have to learn how to hone in that passion. And I would rather you have that biblical, godly passion and then slowly correct it, rather than just completely giving up because you don't want to hurt anyone. Yeah. It's like, man, like sanctification and bringing this problem hopefully to fruition, like trying to fix this problem, it is going to be messy. It is going to be hard, and people are going to be upset. And this is probably deconstructing the non-denominational church as it looks right now. That's a big deal. And so it is going to hurt, and we got to be okay with that. And so hopefully that's not too aggressive.
Yeah. No, but it makes sense. And I mean, I think a lot of people do give people like Redeemed Zoomer a lot of criticism for their passion and their desire to create change. But I do think that it takes somebody who's willing to ruffle some feathers to cause that change that maybe you don't want now, right? But that long term is going to create a lasting impact that does positively impact people's lives. And even though I don't love the way that he goes about it all the time, he's definitely, gaining a following because of that. And there's a lot of people who are really passionate like him.
And I think ultimately that's the answer to what men are looking for, is finding something that they can lay down their lives for, to build the kingdom of God, building something eternal by sacrificing their own good. I really think that's what men are after right now.
Well, and I think that men also want something that is as strong as what they're looking for, right? And I think that you brought that up too, right? I think a lot of men want a strong church. And when we have a feminized church, like you were talking about, even some of the churches that I've attended in the past, women can really run the whole thing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that it reduces the value of men and how they feel about the strength of their leadership, right? And how they feel like they're being led in Christ. And if they're not feeling like they're being led in Christ in the correct way, then they might just walk away entirely, right? And we don't want that. So
yeah. Well, and I think we can all agree from this conversation that the only thing that's going to save the world is God, and dedicating our lives to that, to the kingdom, is the only thing that can save the country, can save the world, can put us all back together, and can bring us unity. This was a great conversation, Dillon. We really appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you guys are doing. And just like you said, like I love that there are people who are stepping up with that passion to potentially make actual change. And that's okay to do. And that's okay to have that heart and that vision as long as you're doing it with honesty and respect, not trying to glorify yourself or make a name for yourself. But you really see the hurt. And you talked about a little bit in there. There are young men that are truly struggling. And if you talk to them, you will understand very quickly that they feel lost. They feel like they don't have purpose. They don't feel like there's anyone listening to them, that as soon as they start to talk about any of the problems they're having, the things they're thinking about, it seems as if older men kind of shun them away and don't really like listen to maybe what's happening. They just kind of plug their ears and keep chugging along with their mega church model. And it's like, there are young men that are truly struggling, but the cool part is they truly want more. They want to know about church history. They want to know about deep theology and read the classics. Like, what a great opportunity we have to step up and to give them those resources and that experience and start this discussion. Man, the world is our oyster, and I really think this next generation, guys like you, like there's a lot of potential, and I really hope we do something with it. And so, if I could plug here, Protestant Gentlemen, I am trying to start one of the biggest online gentlemen school communities in the country. And so conversations like this, intentional conversations like this around Protestantism and around being a gentleman, I really want to have that conversation because I think it's a great balance. It's not the toxic masculinity, but it's also not the feminization of men. It's kind of in that middle, that elegant Protestant gentleman that truly cares. And I'm excited, man. I'm excited.
Yeah. A lot of hope for the future. And as you continue to inspire gentlemen, we will continue to hopefully inspire unity in the church body. This was great. Thank you, Dillon. And continue to follow along as we trace the cross. We will be having more things like this, and we're very excited for the future.
Thank you, Dillon. Appreciate
Thanks, Dillon.